This episode is dedicated to the loving memory of Alexandra Sandra Fedorik, nee Yakemchuk, who passed peacefully January 9th, 2023. Welcome to another episode of my weekly podcast, Later That Same Life. Each week, a topic, discussion, or story from our lives.
Season 7, Chapter 12.
In memory of Mom. My brother and I lost our mom. She was 94. 94 and 3 months. I mention the months because it nicely rounds up her days on Earth to about 34,400. That's pretty incredible. 34,400 days. And all but the last few were vital, active, social, and relevant. That's a pretty good deal. Any of us would take that, right? Oh, sure, there were the obvious challenges of aging. First a cane, then a walker, more frequent doctor visits, and being on a first-name basis with everyone at the pharmacy. But otherwise, over 34,000 pretty good days. Ezekiel J. Emanuel is a doctor who writes about aging. Said something recently that caught my attention. He pointed out that those extra 15 or 20 years that we all hope to live don't happen in your 30s. They come at the end of life, and often aren't the best years of our lives. We were lucky. Mom was lucky, if that's the right term. Well, it's not, but I don't have a better one. That almost all of those so-called extra years were still pretty good. Losing a parent is never easy, even as an adult. I am an adult. Allegedly, I am more equipped to handle this? Sure, yeah, I guess. It was a bigger shock to the system when our dad passed about 42 years ago. That wasn't supposed to happen then. You were supposed to have your parents into their ripe old age. They would be interacting with your kids, their grandchildren, and so forth. That did happen with Mom, but doesn't make the loss any easier. She was 94. Her passing was not unexpected. But my brother and I had this other thing. We thought there was a pretty good chance she would outlive the both of us. I pictured a scenario where my mom would get a letter from the Queen congratulating her on her 100th birthday. From the Queen, who would then be 102. Soccer legend Pelé died recently at 82. His mother was too ill to make his funeral, but she was still around. I think my brother and I pictured this similar extraordinary circumstance befalling us. It wasn't denial. It was just easier to conceive of and deal with our own demise than coping with the more likely outcome, the loss of a parent. Up until my mom's passing, I lived under the misconception that I was an adult. I was a grown man, earned a living, had kids, kept up reasonable living quarters, drove a car. When necessary, I could shop for and prepare my own food. If in life you had a certificate, mine would read participant. I have discovered that all of this previous activity was merely an apprenticeship, a warm-up for the first real adult thing that you have to do. You have to say goodbye to your last parent, hoping that all of your decisions and deeds comply with their final wishes, and that their life is properly recognized and honored, and that their memory lives as long as it can. No more just playing grown up. This is it. Interesting that the term adulting has become part of our modern discussion. The new generations, the X, the next, the Y, the Z, etc., they marvel at adulting, how they have to go to work, have their own place, and relationships and responsibilities, challenges. Oh wow, so much to do. Mind you, I can also eat this entire box of cookies in one sitting, and no one's there to stop me. I guess that part is under rewards. Like I said, to me, adulting is not actually being an adult. It's training to be one when the time calls. Also, the thing about adulting, especially when you're just starting out, is that there will always be someone from the previous generation who will start every story with, in my day, which reminds me, in my day, we didn't have those fancy portable wireless cellular telephones. We had hardwired landline phones in our homes. When somebody called, the first thing you said was, "How are you?" Not, "Where are you?" So I still have a landline. I don't know why I still have it. There's maybe 3 people in the world who still call it. Everyone else calls my cell. One of those people was Mom. Days after the funeral, when I was back home, the landline rang. I remember just looking at it and musing to myself, well, I guess that's not Mom calling. But then I thought, geez, what if it is? It wasn't, but in that moment, I just let it ring, almost going to voicemail, steeling myself for the possibility that my recently deceased mother was calling me on my landline. The afterworld and lingering spirits isn't even necessarily my belief system. And if it was, I'm pretty sure spirits don't contact the living using the Bell Telecom system. But still, 1,000 thoughts were racing through my head between each ring. Hey, Mom, where are you? Feeling better? Did you like my eulogy? I told those stories you like. Okay, Larry, snap out of it. Answer the phone. It's not Mom calling. But even when I picked up, I said, "Hello?" Imagine my relief when I picked up and it was a current living human being that I know on the other end, not my deceased mom. Then imagine my later disappointment that it wasn't her. Would have liked to have that last chat that we really didn't get to have. The last phone conversation we had was my mom informing me that her cousin Olga had died. They were exactly 1 day apart in age, lifelong friends, and for the last 2 years both lived in the same retirement residence. Mom told me that she had passed, and she couldn't talk too much more because she had to get down to the dining room for the second sitting of breakfast. I call that our life goes on conversation. Someone died, but you still got to eat. By the way, Mom was not being flip about it. She was grief-stricken at the loss of her friend and cousin. And subsequently, as she fell ill and went into the hospital, she was determined to get out and attend Olga's prayer services. Instead, on the night of the prayers, Mom herself passed quietly in hospital. People have become fond of saying that at least now they are together again. I hope so. I wanted this podcast episode to be more about the grieving process than, say, my mom's life story. I mean, for one, her life was 94 years. How would anyone do justice to that in a podcast? A Netflix mini-series, maybe. I'm far from an expert on grieving. For one, I'm a pretty pragmatic individual. Secondly, I can be both stoic and private. I can get through my mom's funeral with solemnity and grace, but then later I might break down in tears after watching a toilet paper commercial on TV. Come on, those little kitty cats are pretty cute. It took me years to figure out that was just a displacement or replacement, and that I wasn't really a bad person. I looked up the stages of grieving. They're similar to the stages of death: shock, anger, denial, acceptance, and so forth. Usually, in the last stage, they talk about the process. Grief is a process. Not too many hints about what exactly that process is. I suppose it's pretty individual. But we all agree that it's a process. I guess it is. I think that process pops in and out of your thoughts during a loss. I think the grieving process can be part of the shock, the anger, the denial. Probably not so much, though, during the adulting part. My brother and I had to clean out my mom's apartment. We had to look at every photo, slip of paper, item of clothing, trying to understand what it meant to her. That was grief. I don't imagine a lot of grief happens when you have to start talking to lawyers, bankers, and credit card companies. After all that is done, I think the process will really start. And again, it'll come and go. I don't think you can always control it. Oh, sure, you can sit and reflect and remember. There will be those times. But otherwise, I think it comes and goes out of the blue on its own schedule. It just calls you. Hey, Larry, time to grieve now. I don't care that you have to work. I don't care that it's Super Bowl halftime and your team is up by 2 touchdowns. Don't care that you were sleeping. It's grieving time. It can happen anytime, anywhere. And for me, especially when that landline rings again. Queen Elizabeth II was famous for saying that grief is the price we pay for love. Incidentally, she was quoting Dr. Colin Murray Parkes, a psychiatrist who writes about bereavement in adult life. Grief is the price we pay for love. This much math I could do in my head. Much grief means much love. And much love is something not to be sad about, but to be grateful for. I choose to remain forever grateful. And I suspect that my grief will be unique and personal, and at times perhaps even comforting. Over the last few years, I started to wonder what kind of legacy I would leave behind when my time comes. I think that is common among people my age. I certainly see enough people trying to rewrite their own history in an attempt to leave a better legacy. I've given up on legacy building. Because, your legacy building began years ago, before you even knew it. Its cornerstones are the way you treated others and conducted yourself, and each deed added another brick. My mom's legacy, among many other things, was that she was our beloved mother. As well, she was a wonderful grandmother, auntie, godmother, ersatz Grams, and friend to a large extended family. As an avid historian, she helped chronicle the Kempchuk clan so that the family story could be passed down to future generations. As a school teacher of 35 years, and an average of 25 to 30 kids a year, she made a difference in so many lives. Being out in public with Mom was like being out with a celebrity. Inevitably, some adult with kids of their own would stop her and say, "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Fedorik? You may not remember me, but you were my teacher in grade 5 at this school, and you were the best teacher I ever had. Just wanted to say hello," and so on. The thing about Mom is, she always remembered. And not that fake remembering that we all do when we meet someone we're not sure of. Mom remembered. Even after the other person left, Mom would begin telling me their story. Oh, he loved music class. She was always good at math, and so on, in great detail about one of her former students. Living to age 94, she was actually retired more years than she worked. But she stayed active in the church, the Ukrainian Catholic Women's League, as well as pursuing her love of music, painting, sculpting, and archiving. Like I said, she helped preserve histories. And if that sounds like a newspaper obit, well, it pretty much is. How do you capsulize a lifetime, especially one of 94 years? There is one story I would like to share that I included in her eulogy. When it was my turn to speak, grab the microphone and address a crowd, my old days of doing stand-up came back to me. And I thought, gee, I hope I don't get heckled. If I get heckled doing my mom's eulogy, well, I don't know. I think the standard comebacks and the FUs might not be appropriate here in the church basement of Saints Peter and Paul Ukrainian Parish. Anyway, I don't think I got heckled. Not that I can remember. So the story, Mom is born, raised, and passed in Saskatchewan. But for a brief time, she was with us here in the Greater Toronto area. One summer day, she was 90 at the time, I took her to a Ukrainian festival in the park. At one point, we decided to get something to eat. Mom got a kick out of this, by the way, so when I pointed out there was 3 main booths for food, one said, "Best pierogies in town." The next one said, "Best pierogies in the city." And the third one said, "World's best pierogies." Well, we went to the third one. What would you do? We got seated in a tented area for lunch, and Mom overheard a conversation in Ukrainian about a town called Alvina, Saskatchewan, and some woman named Sophie something. So Mom interrupts and says, "Excuse me, I went to high school in Alvina with Sophie something. I wonder if it's the same person." Well, the woman says, "That's my mom. It's got to be the same person. And by the way, she's 90, and she's here somewhere. She's just visiting with some other folks in the next tent. I'll go get her." I'm thinking, leave it to my mom. 90 years old, 2,000 miles from home, and she bumps into someone she went to high school with. What are the odds? A few minutes go by and the woman returns with Sophie, a lovely, diminutive, white-haired 90-year-old. And remember, these two have not seen each other since high school. And Sophie takes one look at my mom and says, "Oh my God, Sandy, you haven't changed a bit." Really? Wow. I was stifling my own reaction to that statement. Recently, as I lay awake reciting the stories that I would share in my mom's eulogy, I thought of that one, but suddenly a new ending occurred to me. And it wasn't even a new ending, but more precisely what had actually happened that I hadn't noticed until now. It's not that Sophie had bad eyesight, or that she didn't notice the whiter hair, the diminished stature, or the cane across the back of the chair. I mean, she might have seen all those things. But what she also saw was the twinkle in my mom's eye, the one that was always there. She saw the creative, energetic go-getter from 75 years ago. That look was still there, and that's what she saw. She recognized. She remembered. She was right. Sandy had not changed a bit. The eyes are closed. The memories live. I'm trying to be an adult. My brother and I fondly remember when we were kids and the family had to go out somewhere. My dad would quickly shave, put on a tie and jacket, and then go sit in the car waiting for my mom. Meanwhile, Mom still had much more to do to get herself ready, get us ready, and, put the house in some order. No, Dad was sitting in the car waiting, sometimes tooting the horn. Oh yeah, I guess it's funny now, but as we began each trip, there would always be this argument about what took you so long. Dad passed 42 years ago. At the cemetery, as I watched my mom's coffin being lowered into the family plot next to Dad, I pictured Dad pointing at his watch and going, I guess some things never change.
Later That Same Life is written, produced, and voiced by Larry Fedoruk. Larry Fedoruk, 37 @gmail.com.